unexpected psychosis of the pre-human monkeys turned out to be the beginning of consciousness. So it was something very creative and revitalizing. It was a healing act of nature. It was so then, why shouldn't it be today? It seems that we have not yet understood its restorative dimension, since the psychosis created the consciousness. The latter is only the emanation of the former. The empty interpolar space of the time shortly after the appearance of the anxiety mutation and the emergence of the bipolar psyche began to be filled with psychological material only thanks to the depressive psychosis of primal monkeys. It was the psychosis that was the generator of this material, and its first product was the appearance of a psychological feeling of the type of self reflection, as distinct from the neurological feeling inherent in all animals from the very early stages of evolution. Neurological sensation gives animals a sense of touch, pain, temperature, vibration, so it's a physical feeling, and it's only apparently similar to the mental feeling. The latter is not possessed by animals. And here I think I hear a great stir among those who read these words. How come animals do not have a mental feeling? Total nonsense. Anyone who has a pet, a cat or a dog at home knows very well that animals are also sad and happy in turns. So psychological feeling is not strange to them. Now, what we see in animals is a pure, undisturbed expression of the emotional pole, which by all means is responsible for the emotional sinusoid inherent in all animals, including man. I say undisturbed expression because in the interpolar space, since animals have only one psychic pole, this space is from one side endless. The interpolar space, in the interpolar space, there is an emptiness in animals. This is why it's so easy for us to observe animal emotional states. And as to the fact that cats, dogs, and other higher animals display a sadness, a joy, a curiosity, boredom, hostility, and friendship, I have no doubts whatsoever. Well, I'm so sure of this, together with animal lovers, that I even call the animal psyche the unipolar psyche. It's because of the emotional pole present in their psyche. The pole, which for all higher animals except man, is the pinnacle of the evolution of the psyche. So, how is my understanding of the emotional states of the pets different from the owner's understanding of these states? From their owner's understanding of these states? Or perhaps, as we will shortly see, it's not a question of a difference in understanding, but a question of understanding what the expression of these states is. Well, the appearance of the most primal and very primitive matter in the interpolar space of the pre-human apes caused something that had never appeared in the animal world before and will never appear again, and will be specific only to the man. Namely, neither the emotional pole nor the anxiety pole will henceforth be able to control the behavior of these pre-human beings in a way that is 100% straightforward, sincere, and naive, the way it's like in the unipolar animals. This event is so important important that we should date with it the beginning of the existence of the historical man. This is hardly surprising. The appearance of what human and only human trait might be more appropriate to recognize this moment as the beginning of the existence of the humanity as separate from the animality than the appearance of the consciousness. And here the first fragments of the consciousness in the form of the seeds of feeling born as a result of the primordial psychosis become an obstacle in the interpolar space for emotions emanating from the emotional pole of the psyche. We already know that the first bits of the interpolar matter were a feeling of happiness and a feeling of hope. Let's take a look at what happens when the stream of energy from the emotional pole meets on its way crumbs of the interpolar matter in the form of either seeds of happiness or seeds of hope. If the emotional energy is positive, it continues to be strengthened by encountering happiness along the way. What will happen when it's a negative energy? By sadness, disappointment, hatred. In such a case, some of the energy coming from the emotional pole to meet the feeling of happiness will be absorbed by the latter, resulting in the weaker expression of the negative emotion. Thus, even the pre-human apes unknowingly use the first primordial material of the interpolar space, born of the first psychosis, the material of feeling happiness, to oppose the destructive power of the emotional pole. The same negative emotional arousal coming from the emotional pole in the animal monkeys will therefore always have a more radical external expression than in the prehuman monkeys, because in the case of the latter, this stimulation will be absorbed by the interpolar material. On the other hand, the positive emotion will always be more strongly expressed in the pre-human monkeys and in the humans than in the mentally unipolar animals. And this is the role of the interpolar material, or the consciousness, the role which gains in strength and diversity in the course of the evolution of the great apes and then of the man. The consciousness, due to its origin out of the primordial psychosis, is conceived from the very beginning of its existence as a quencher of the negative energy coming from the anxiety and emotional poles of the human psyche, and as an amplifier of the positive energy derived from the emotional pole. And that's its only task. Of course, it sounds paradoxical and for many also iconoclastic that psychosis turns out to be the foundation of the human psyche. Moreover, it even seems that consciousness, as initiated by primordial psychosis, being its product, is a kind of psychosis. Let's try to look at such a hypothesis. So let's start with the explanations. What do I mean by consciousness? Consciousness is the interpolar material of the psyche in the form of feelings, words, and thoughts. By the term psychosis, we understand the activity of the interpolar material in which words, thoughts, and feelings become independent of both the poles of the psyche and of all external stimuli. Isn't that brilliant, like all the nature mechanisms? If anxiety appeared as a freak of nature, the psychosis is the cure for it. So all of us stem from the psychosis. Abstract thinking is nothing else but just a kind of the psychotic thinking that's independent of both internal influences, the anxiety and emotional pole, and external influences, the environment and the world around us. Of course, the strength of the psychosis must be different in pre-human apes than in modern humans. The former had a very low potential of the interpolar space or consciousness. There were no words or thoughts there yet, just the oldest first feelings such as the aforementioned feeling of happiness and its opposite, and the feeling of hope and its opposite. Poor psychosis, although simple, but also maximally effective. In the modern man, and I mean the man for at least several thousand, if not several 100,000 years, the force of the psychosis will already have the power of an atomic bomb. However, the ancient mechanism of psychosis initiated by nature continues to function despite sometimes its obvious ineffectiveness and even destructiveness in the case of the modern man. The happening of the enormous potential of words, thoughts, and feelings in isolation from the psyche poles and from the environment is responsible for this frightening picture of the modern man psychosis in which the interpolar space starts to live its own life in isolation from the reality. That's in isolation from the reality of the emotional anxiety bipolarity of the psyche and the reality of the surrounding world. Note that the so defined psychosis does not yet differ from the definition of the undisturbed consciousness. Now, the normal consciousness is just a socially desirable state of the primary psychosis. The consciousness is therefore a subtype of the psychosis, and the history of mankind is the history of harnessing its growing potential. A long process of upbringing and learning serves this purpose. We try to emerge from the chaos of the interpolar psychotic space since the dawn of the humanity and since the birth of every individual human life, practicing the ability to organize this chaos as efficiently as possible. Of course, always only for a moment. Since the moment when the human psyche began to function in isolation from any realities, that is, since the time of the primal psychosis of the human primates to the present day, the time of the cosmic man, the human species is improving in the difficult art of harnessing the psychosis. And the result of this art is the consciousness. This art absorbs all the attention and the concentration of a person because it's extremely difficult